I'm Bastian Grimm, and this is SEO in 2023.
Bastian, what is your number one SEO tip for 2023?
I think that SEOs need to get, their heads around the relatively wide topic of AI, which obviously is something around machine learning or has some machine learning components to it, because I think fundamentally this is an area that Google is obviously doing a ton of investment in, but secondarily, like it is so important to understand because how can you optimize for something that you don't understand, right? So from an SEO standpoint, it's like a crucial driving topic for, I would say, not only 2023, but also beyond. So this is why I think getting to grips with it is really important, yeah.
So Google's obviously thinking a lot about AI. Some SEOs, some content marketers are thinking a lot about AI and potentially even actually using AI to generate content. But you're talking about it from the perspective of Google and Google actually using AI to better determine what content to rank.
Yeah, I think as I said, it's an extremely wide area, obviously. And I think, AI in itself has different use cases, right? And I think you mentioned a kind of common one, and there's a bunch of tools out there where, you could start, inputting something like, let's say, write an article about topic XYZ and you get, something, and that something is not always great, but like you get something back. So I think this is one of the more like hands-on use cases, but I think if we zoom out for a bit, SEOs in general tend to they like patterns and they like, ranking factors and these kinds of things. And I think, AI in itself is a wider area. So Google is probably doing a ton of research left, right, and center to see where can, either machine learning as a simpler form or then, at a later stage, AI or AI support make a difference. That can be in terms of like just better search results in general. That can be to determine like content quality. That can be to create content, but also, on the other side, to understand potentially which content has been created by AI, then to understand that that might not eventually be what should be ranking altogether, right? So I think there's a wide area where AI in the future might have its use, but also I suppose in the very near future, so next year or even as of today, partially, where we're already seeing parts of these implementations kind of driving some of the rankings in a way, yeah.
I love how Google is using AI to determine what content is made by using AI. It's a bit of
but that's the nature of the beast, right? I mean, you have this kind of black box situation really, where people I think oftentimes struggle to understand what that really is and what's happening behind the scenes, and a lot of the like current stuff that we're seeing essentially is just is part of a machine learning algorithm or even multiple algorithms that kind of, work in unison to spit out something, right? But and we're at a stage where obviously the result of that is also very much kind of determined and driven by, how good the training data is, which is I think also one of the things that people need to keep in mind. Like, we're talking a lot about like the English language stuff, but essentially if you look beyond that, like smaller languages, we're not there yet, right? I mean, obviously English language is one thing, but then beyond that, and even in Europe, there's much smaller training data. Let's say for Finnish, for example, right? So just the output of that is way less in terms of like quality, so to say. So I think this is also a thing to keep in mind. Like if we're talking about, is Google there or is Google not there yet, or what are they doing? A lot of that might only apply, at least for right now, for like the English kind of search results. I suppose it's also one of the reasons why, if you look at the recent kind of announcements in terms of updates that they're doing, that this usually tends to roll in the English language markets first, or even sometimes exclusively, because the training data and the corpus of data is much bigger than what we have in other languages.
Interesting. Do you mean every country that uses the English language worldwide, or perhaps just the US to begin with?
Well, I mean, historically, Google always has kind of rolled out first in the US, but I mean, right now, yes, there is of course certain localization aspects between like the UK and the US, or African English, or these types of things. But generally, I think you could say the English language in itself, even though there are like nuances that are different, and I mean, no offense to any other like variant of English language in any way, shape, or form, but I think English in itself, they kind of master quite well, but then if it gets to really more complicated stuff, then, or, due to less training data, sometimes they're just not even rolling things out in those different markets. And that also means machine learning can only do so much, right? We need to move beyond that, because once you develop a system that itself has some sort of intelligence to it, then it's not necessarily relying on a limited corpus of training data anymore, because it just can train itself, I suppose. So that's also why I think oftentimes people are kind of mixing up what's just machine learning or machine supervised learning versus actually what is really artificial intelligence in itself, right? That's a different story. So oftentimes it's an oversimplification when you say like, this is all AI, but it's not really AI. It's just like a trained or a multitude of trained algorithms in a way.
Okay, so would you say then that Google are actively using machine learning at the moment, but they're not kind of using AI just now?
Yeah, I mean that's one thing that has changed historically, right? Where Google really continued to push. Historically, especially on the search quality side, they were very, very much kind of against using any way, shape, or form of machine learning. But that was the shift a couple of years ago, and even now, also in like more, let's say, visual platforms like YouTube, right? There's a lot of different types of machine learning algorithms in play. For example, like the recommendations that we all know, right? This is essentially, this is all based on machine learning, and the machine learning takes different types of input, that can be, similar user profiles or, any way data that is somewhat related to it. So machine learning, yes. AI, I think it's a thin line to say it's all AI, because, from the outside, it's hard to judge, first and foremost, but secondarily, I think also for some of the stuff, and I'm not sure, there was a lot of a discussion around, AI all of a sudden becoming this like machine that has, certain feelings, and kind of, where like there was, I think, I forgot his name, but like there was a Googler that I think had been let go of his job, right?
Yeah, I was going to say he's an ex-Googler now, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what I'm saying. Like it's a small and thin line to walk. So machine learning, yes, for sure. AI, maybe not so much. But then again, like this acceleration curve, right, of like progress that we're making. If you look back, how the job of SEOs has changed the last 5 years versus what's probably going to happen in the next 5 years, we just have much more computing power, much more data, much more capabilities to process all of that data. I would imagine that we're just seeing much faster progress.
So whether it's machine learning or AI, Google are looking to use automation to determine content quality and map intent to that content quality. So what precisely are they looking at within the content to decide upon the quality and map intent to that? And what do SEOs need to do about that?
Yeah, I think, historically what was a huge struggle is that, let's take an e-commerce business, right? They, of course, want to sell their products. They have to sell their products. They have, product descriptions probably around like the articles that they're trying to sell. But like oftentimes the decision has been formed, much earlier on, when someone is like in this informational stage of like trying to do some research around, I don't know, like a washing machine, for example, right? And you're like, probably, you have a new, maybe you have a bigger family now, you want to know what type of washing machine do you need, et cetera, et cetera. So you're like in this informational kind of journey. And then the question is like, what does that person really want when it's actually searching for something like, just washing machine, right? Is it already a purchase query, or is it maybe just in this informational stage, or somewhat in between? And like that person might want to kind of have a, comparison or even a recommendation. In like if you would go to a local store, you would kind of have this, what we call in search, I guess, query refinement, right? So it's like, I want a washing machine. And it's like, you kind of have this dialogue with a person, which you probably don't have when you do like a search query. So I think this is also one of the reasons why Google's actually moving into this like more journey situation, rather than have like your one single input output without understanding the context or the meaning around it. So I think from that perspective, what they are looking for is obviously to find results that ideally can answer or support in, no matter what stage you're in. So it can be, a piece of content that you would get from that specific shop that is like still in this informational, where the person is still in the informational journey, but also, once you're like, okay, maybe, I want this comparison because I want to figure out which one is the right one for me, then you might have preferred like to get a, let's say like a table or like a listing of different types of machines. And then at the end of the day, you might want this one single recommendation being shown to you. So I think fundamentally what they're trying very hard is to understand, what's the best results, obviously, but what company or domain, let's say, can help in all the different stages in this specific case. I'm not saying this is true for every vertical, but especially in e-commerce, where you have very different types of like queries that kind of all are supporting each other in a way. I think that's super important. So essentially, like I think it has been called, holistic content or whatever name you want to put to it. But essentially, my mind is, they them being Google, no matter how generic or specific the query is, their biggest goal is at that point in your journey. They need to understand where you are in this journey and then serve the respective content. And that can be something very different when you search a washing machine versus when I search a washing machine, because we might be implicitly in a different type of this journey. And I think this is the big thing, where the more training data you have, the more machine learning you can apply, and the more like factors you can get in, right? And I think this is a crucial thing to understand also for Google, because if you look at search results historically, there was oftentimes Google's answer was just like, if you search for, I don't know, like I'm a big car fan, right? So I drive Audi, and like when you search for Audi at the time, like you would get like a whole ton of brand rankings, like the homepage and some like work at Audi and this and the other. And like if you look at those generic search results, they've changed so much over the years, because Google always kind of got better in understanding how does a proper selection look like. Maybe Bastian has an interest in driving like, I don't know, like an RS3, so like I serve this model page and not just working at Audi, because he's not going to work at Audi anyways, those kinds of things. Like understanding, even without my implicit refinement or like implicit query as an input, what do I want is, I think, something that's fundamentally important. And then if you turn it around, what do we need SEOs like to kind of to do, and what's their like, or what should be their task or priority in terms of content? I think it's creating content that's informing these different types of decisions and supports in those different types of journeys. So I think this is also a reason why there's not one single answer to like, how long does a content need to be, or how short should it be? This has all been like historically made up kind of metrics that are just not true, because it's extremely depending on the topic and how much information can you as a site provide, and what kind of information do I really need? Because on the other hand, if it's simplified information that can be served through structured data, or like just with a single like input output answer, Google is going to do that themselves anyways, right? So like if you want to know how tall a certain public figure is, then you just ask and you get the answer straight away. I mean, this is nothing new. So I think for me it's more like on the back of it, like the bigger stuff that Google can't answer straight away. This is, I think, where you need to be and where you need to kind of build content that's supporting this entire journey, from like, I have no idea what I want, to like, okay, this is me, I want to buy it, let's go for it. I think this is the entire process that you need to support.
So you must serve the correct intent in 2023.
Yeah, exactly.
But you also must still continue trying to be an authoritative source. So how do you become the trusted resource on a particular topic?
I mean, this is obviously going a lot into a topic that's been talked about a lot, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years, right? Everything that revolves around like EAT and, becoming or being this trustworthy, not only person, but generally entity, you could probably say, and that entity can be a person or a multitude of, people or whatever. But I think, I mean, again, this is a topic that's probably very, very, very broad, but necessarily I think what it is you need to build up this reputation over time. It's not going to happen from one day to the other, sadly, I think. So there's always this...
So machine learning hasn't radically impacted the way that authority is built?
No, I wouldn't say it not necessarily, because I mean, what it certainly does is it helps to understand if someone is in fact an authority, because you can start mapping out things. And for example, like if you're in, like, let's say the pharmaceutical context, right? For Google, it would be easy to say, okay, I take a certain set of training data that's solely like related to, let's say prescription information for certain types of drugs, right? So I could process that, and based on that specific corpus for a vertical like pharmaceutical, I would know how does, a pharmaceutical site structure-wise look like, if that makes any sense, right? So it's like it would be much more easy for a machine to understand, is that actually a typical site, rather than is that just me on my blog writing something about a drug which is probably dangerous in different ways, shapes, and forms? So you don't want that, and you don't want to rank that. So I think for that, machine learning is great because again, you can have like verticalized approaches to using different types of data, and then therefore come to different conclusions as to like, okay, how does a specific authority in pharmaceutical look like versus versus something entirely different. So for that, certainly it helps, but generally speaking, I guess becoming an authority is not like done. That's what I meant. It's not done overnight. It's more like you need to invest, and that's content, that's reputation, that's of course means citations / linking, etc. So these things are still there. It's just like the process takes time. That's what I meant. So you're not, unfortunately, usually not becoming authority from one day to the other, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and I loved your thoughts that a certain industry has a certain type of website, and Google knows what that kind of website looks like if you are going to be an authority in the industry. Yeah. If you're a thought leader or a blog publisher, then obviously you've got a different style of website, and Google are going to understand that and position you elsewhere within that particular industry. Well, you've shared what SEO should be talking about in 2023 or actually doing in 2023. So now let's talk about what SEO shouldn't be doing. So what's something that's seductive in terms of time, but ultimately counterproductive? What's something that SEOs shouldn't be doing in 2023?
Well, I mean, I think there's still a lot of like old-fashioned tactics out there. So if we just put them, like let's take, automated generating of like linking and these types of things. I think this has like all been like dead for years. So I think let's put that aside. But I think like a general mindset that I see quite often, which I think is also, and it's more a conceptual tip rather than like a very hands-on, but like, this chasing different types of patterns or like isolated ranking factors, as in like, okay, if I do this, then the needle might move like this 1% kind of a mentality. I think this is just something that people need to stop obsessing about, because this is just not how search works anymore. Like, if you have machines informing decisions based on a broad variety of data, yeah, it might move the needle by this 1%, but the question is that really worth your time? So I think my general advice would be, don't obsess about individual isolated ranking factors as much as you've probably done in the past. Yes, sure, you still need proper page titles, but not only because they are, a ranking factor, but because at the end of the day, they make a difference in terms of CTR. They inform what that destination page is all about. It probably might be used as an internal link, anchor text, etc. Right? So, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't do that, but like, just don't obsess with individual things. Just make it as good as you can and build a site that actually has its meaning and is informing, a decision along a user's journey, and then the rest, I would say, kind of comes with it. But just like, stop obsessing about isolated ranking factors would be my advice for the future, for sure.
Bastian Grimm is CEO and co-founder at Peak Ace, and you can find him over at pa.ag. Bastian, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2023.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
Get your copy of SEO in 2023, the book, over at SEOin2023.com.